Good Baltimore-ing, everyone. Sorry for the little delay there. We're trying to get the tech issues out of the way before we went live. So now, knock on wood, we're going to have no tech issues today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kira Wisniewski. I have the distinct honor to be your host and co-organizer of Creative Mornings Baltimore. We are coming to you live this morning from Adorn Vintage Furniture here in Baltimore City on Piscataway land. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Raina, for letting us be in this beautiful, beautiful space. Everything that we're sitting on right now is available for sale. And before we get really started, though, I just want to say Black lives continue to matter. Creative Mornings Baltimore is one of over 200 events happening around the globe. And the thing that really unites us all is that we all believe that everyone is invited and everyone is creative. We're really pleased to be having our friends Lauren and Sherry from HASA who are providing sign language interpretation for us today. We know that we can't really live up to our mantra of everyone is invited and everyone is creative if we don't do more for accessibility. And our ASL is underwritten by Eddie's of Roland Park. And keeping on the theme of this month, Eddie's of Roland Park is introducing its newly designed holiday catalog online and in stores beginning November 1st. Scan here to receive a copy in your inbox. Plus, Eddie's in-house graphic designer, Sophia Schwartz, will be taking over the Creative Mornings Baltimore Instagram feed next Friday, October 28th, for a behind-the-scenes look at design as it pertains to a local grocery store. Shout out to Eddie's of Roland Park. I know we are very much over the pandemic. I know we're all feeling that very much in our souls. So really want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. We know that it can be very tempting to just do a little email or, take care of this, that, or the other thing. But I want you to give yourself permission to just fully be here. Just be here in the space with us, sip in your beverage of choice this early in the morning. Maybe it's some white tea. I don't know. But really, you deserve this time. Just hang out with us for like the next 45 minutes or so. I promise it will be great. I also know that this can't replace the IRL experience, but hopefully in 2022, we'll be able to reconvene Creative Mornings as it was intended. But again, thank you so much for being here this morning. Don't forget to tag us on whatever social media you prefer. Our handle is Baltimore_CM. We would love to see what this looks like from your end. And now I want to introduce our Creative Mornings Manifesto. So each month we like to feature somebody who's truly special to our community to read our manifesto. Today I'm very excited that we have Winston Joe. He has been here behind the scenes with us since 2017. And also if you need any kind of photographer for your wedding, your kickball birthday party, whatever you need, he's ready. He's a super dope photographer, and you can check out his website. I think we're going to put that up on the screen too. Hey, welcome, Winston. Please take it away.
Wow, amazing. I hope this works. I can't believe this is the first time doing this. All right, y'all ready? Let's do it. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others, in virtual hugs and digital high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Winston. I also want to highlight that we have our friend Anita in the chat. She is going to be engaging with you over on YouTube. So, hey, Anita.
Hey.
Hi. So there she is, beautiful Anita, talking to you on the YouTubes, the face behind the chat. She's ready to engage with you there. So thank you. Welcome, Anita. And thank you all for, for being here with us this morning. Creative Mornings all over the world runs on a engine of generosity. It's really by people and companies that give a damn. We're all volunteers here, and we also wouldn't be able to function without our sustaining partners. And because of one of our sustaining partners, Alpha Graphics, we have analog signs that we're going to show you courtesy of Sabina. So starting with, of course, Adorn Vintage Furniture, where we are right now. Come by tomorrow from 10 to 2, I think the hours are. 10 to 2. Come by. Buy this set that we're sitting on right now. We have Pixelated Photo Booth. They're doing really interesting things for like virtually hybrid events right now. Definitely check out their Pixie Web stuff. Let's do that one last. White Tea Co. They're located in Whitehall Mill. Like, honestly, my favorite tea. And then we have Hasa. We got Sherry and Lauren here from Hasa doing sign language interpretation. Yeah. Impact Hub Baltimore. And then Local Color Flowers. These flowers right here from Local Color Flowers. Maryland Art Place, which is our fiscal sponsor. Shout out to them. And then, of course, Eddie's of Roland Park. Yeah. And Alpha Graphics, who did all of these lovely signs. And then globally, we are sponsored by Skillshare and MailChimp. So big ups to them. Yeah. Thank you, Sabina. And we're also going to drop in the chat and YouTube right now a list to all of the partners that we've been lucky enough to be working with since our relaunch in 2019. And you can also see all of those partners that we've had in our community, on our website. And really, now more than ever, is so important to be really uplifting and supporting these local businesses. And even if you can't support them monetarily, go ahead and follow them on Instagram, like their stuff, share their stuff, write reviews on Google and Yelp and other things. It's really, anything is so important to keeping these really vital local organizations afloat. So please, I encourage you to do that. At least one of them today. A challenge. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I challenge you. This month's theme is design. And it was selected by the Tro Rivieras chapter. And it was designed by Oliver Charland. And Skillshare is presenting the theme globally. I'm sorry I didn't put a slide up for you for that, Henley. So it's on our website, too. All right. We got all the housekeeping and welcomes and thank yous aside. Now, for why we are here today, I want to introduce our wonderful speaker. So, Emily serves as a deputy director of the innovation team in the Baltimore Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation, also known as OPI. While leading design for the office, she's leading the design for the office. She's a multidisciplinary designer on a mission to build a Baltimore with resident-centered services, a modern and standardized visual design language, and user-friendly forms, websites, and interfaces. Prior to public service, Emily spent a decade crafting brands, experiences, and ad campaigns for nonprofits, higher ed, and small businesses. Creative Mornings Baltimore, please welcome Emily Ianacone to the Creative Mornings stage.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's really exciting to be here. So I've been a designer for over 15 years, and when Kira and Mario reached out and asked me if I would be a Creative Morning speaker for the theme design, they wondered if it might be a little too on the nose, but I promised not to make this a traditional Design 101 lecture. So thank you all for joining this morning. As I started putting pen to paper for this, I found myself inspired by the line, "To design is to be human," from the Creative Mornings theme description. A universal truth is that, yes, most humans create things, we experiment, we make, we remake, but design isn't necessarily exclusive to humans. A spider spins its web to entrap its next meal. A bird takes flight to reach its destination. A burr becomes attached to moving objects to spread its seeds. And ducks use their webbed feet to paddle along in the water. Mother Nature is a great designer, and the plasticity and resilience of the human brain is, in my opinion, one of her strongest portfolio pieces, but I'll share more on that later. One of my favorite concepts for design and engineering is biomimicry, which is when humans design a thing, usually a product, that's inspired by something that they've seen in nature. Cables to support a bridge, a speedier mode of transportation, and one of my personal greatest fears in life, a stronger fastener for everyday use, and a smoother way to glide through water. So I would argue that design isn't exclusive to the human experience. I spent the first half of my career as a visual designer and writer in commercial design, which at times felt soulless depending on the client, or all the time soulless if you're a design critic like Victor Papanek. I'm sure other creatives who have had a subscription to Adbusters and question the sustainability of capitalism can relate to that. After graduate school at MICA, here in Baltimore, I left the private sector to apply human-centered design methodologies to government services and products. For those who are unfamiliar, human-centered design approaches problem-solving by including the human perspective at every stage of the design process: research, ideation, prototyping, and testing, et cetera, to really center human wants and needs. I've worked with a wide range of government stakeholders since then, focusing initially on child welfare, an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, with the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families as a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow. Following that, I was embedded in a human services agency in Pittsburgh, where I continued to work on child welfare reform through a program called Foster America. And for the last 4 years, I've been with the City of Baltimore, working in the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. As a city, we very much should be getting the perspective of residents when designing or redesigning products and services that they use. And we do our best to do so within the scope of our small office's projects. I lead the multidisciplinary innovation team, and the 4 of us typically work on one big project at a time, while taking on some more design-focused ad hoc projects when they come up. An example of what that might look like is when our data teams, for example, CityStat, are working on a data dashboard. We'll help them with user testing and make sure that the data products are as user-friendly as possible. We're big on using human-centered design for solving social problems in the city. What happens, though, when collective we, in both the public and private sector, put humans at the center of everything? Now, in the context of the work that I do in the public sector, a human-centered design approach makes a lot of sense. So I'm being a little provocative and pointing a little bit more at the private sector when I ask this question. We end up with innovations that are like a more convenient cup of coffee, a more efficient way to kill, a platform for social connection containing boundless knowledge and misinformation disguised as knowledge, and a legislative body that deprioritizes children and families in favor of more lucrative pursuits like warmongering when crafting policy. It seems like since the dawn of humankind, we've centered humans, and at some point we went from creating for our survival to creating for our convenience and for profit and glory for a few. What kind of world are we leaving for future generations when so many things that we're making are unsustainable, disposable, or in the case of many electronics today, designed to degrade faster over time, known as planned obsolescence? And I think the iPhone's a great example of that when it changes so often. I think it's less than every 4 years. There's a new model that comes out and replaces the old one. What if we started with the intent to design things that cause minimal harm to ourselves, other life forms, and the planet itself? What if we recognize that humans are a part of nature just as much as the birds and frogs and flowers, instead of constantly othering ourselves and saying there's us and there's nature? I am far from perfect when it comes to minimizing my own ecological impact, and I'd be lying if I said that sometimes it does seem a little futile when there needs to be a more concerted effort to make any real progress. I do want to acknowledge all of the folks who worked on the new plastic bag ban here in Baltimore. Thank you for all of your work on that. It's exciting to see it launch. What if we chose to center life beyond humans and traded human-centered design for life-centered design? I was thinking about this a lot before the pandemic when I was working on a project related to reducing litter and dumping in the city. I started poking around to see if any other designers felt the same way. And I did find a few articles that shared this sentiment. So I'm not here to take credit for life-centered design as a concept. It's not mine. I don't own it. I'm here to promote it. I recently became a mom, and it's without a doubt the coolest and hardest thing that I've ever done. And I am somebody who has gone through the government procurement process. So that says a lot. Something I've learned 12 weeks in is that to be a mom is to worry all of the time about your child's health and safety and go from 0 to 60 when you see others behaving in a way that could potentially cause your child harm. It might be especially strong for me because my son unexpectedly spent the first week of his life in the NICU, and having him away from me for hours at a time between visits was harrowing. If I could eternal sunshine my mind to reduce the pain of those memories and relieve the subsequent anxiety that I felt over his safety, I would. But he's home now, he's happy, he's healthy, and I'm so grateful for that. I still worry though. Some of it I know is irrational. My husband tells me it's irrational, which is helpful to ground me, but there are a lot of real and growing challenges for my son's generation. For starters, he was born during a global pandemic. I also am very interested in opening an education fund for him, but when he's 18, will it even matter? Or at that point, will we be embroiled in a series of water wars a la Mad Max Fury Road thanks to climate change? Time will tell. My husband and I now have the responsibility of raising a human who values and respects the natural world and the beings in it. Some things are well beyond your control as a parent, but you could argue that one has the ability to design a human and their behavior to some degree. For example, I know that if I am not attentive to my son's needs, if I provide inconsistent care in any way, or am neglectful, or continuously physically or emotionally harm him, over time there's a strong possibility that it would alter the chemical structure of his brain and in effect cause him to develop insecure attachments. He may struggle with having healthy self-esteem, controlling his emotions, or forming healthy relationships. He may struggle with a host of isms. With the proper interventions, he could maybe heal from the damage that I caused, but it would take a lot of work and a lot of suffering. If I provide consistent care and affection and proactively repair the times that I've consciously or unconsciously caused harm, there's a stronger chance that he will thrive in adulthood, be able to regulate his emotions, have better cognitive function, and form healthy relationships. As I said before, Mother Nature really did a number when it comes to the human brain. I'm also aware of the immense privilege that my son had coming into this world. To have a family that can not only meet his basic needs, but provide additional opportunities when it comes to his education and enrichment. So when I say you can design a human to some degree, I really do mean to some degree because I'm aware that there are social determinants of health that may be out of one's control depending on circumstances. Studies like the Long Shadow Sociological Study in Baltimore have shown that your destiny, your income, your quality of life, and how long you live can very much be determined by your zip code and the color of your skin. It is the biggest social challenge that we face here in Baltimore, and one that I would love to see overcome in my lifetime. Since becoming a parent, I felt two things very deeply. One, I no longer feel the drive I once did to achieve the conventional markers of success that someone might want out of a design career. It was almost like this flip was switched, or switch was flipped as soon as he was born. And some of the things that really used to matter to me just don't anymore. It's a very interesting feeling that I've been sitting with. But like some of the conventional things, they may come with more pay, but they would also come with longer hours, more time away from the people I love. And I really don't want to say yes to everything like I have in the past. And I want to push back on requests that have a false sense of urgency. And I think a lot of people might agree with me that in today's hyper-connected world, there are more and more of those kinds of situations to say no to. Two, I feel even stronger incentive now to continue using my design practice to create a better world for my son and children here in Baltimore. And that starts with thinking beyond traditional design and innovation. I want them to grow to be healthy people in a healthy world. When starting the design process, it really helps to have a set of guiding principles to shape your work. And that's something that we do on my team to start with intention. So depending on what project we're working on, we will develop a set of guiding principles for the work. And we do try to incorporate community voice into what those guiding principles are. For me, moving forward, using design to leave this planet better than I found it for future generations is at the very top of my list.
Yay! Thank you, Emily. I have so many questions. I feel like you at home or wherever you are joining us from probably also have so many questions. So now is your time to do it. If you are joining us on either YouTube or Facebook, you can type your questions directly into the comments or chat area, and then I'll be able to see them here and pull them up on the screen, and then I'll read them to Emily, and we can have a little Q&A. So please go ahead, get those questions going. But when you're doing that, I'll go ahead and I can start. It's so exciting to hear about where you took this talk because as you were saying, it felt like almost a little too on the nose asking you to speak about design, given that that is what your job is. So I really love that you took it into this like life-centered design kind of talk and like reflecting about like being a new mom and thinking about your son. Like that's all so beautiful and I love it. But I'm curious if that's where you always knew this talk was going to go, or if like, tell me a little bit of the journey of the evolution of this talk and this theme.
Sure, happy to do so. So initially, when I spoke with Kira and Mario when planning for the talk, I thought about it would be more really focused on like my career and my personal life in shaping the sort of like designing the life that I wanted to have. You know, kind of talking about starting in commercial design and moving towards the social impact space and things, working on things that align more with my own personal values. And what it means to sort of design your life while, you know, moving on in your career. And then I threw a little bit of a curveball in and changed it because I've been on family leave for the last 12 weeks, and I wrote this while my son would nap, and he would nap on me because he's a big contact napper. So I took those opportunities to write this out on my phone, and having him so close to me really kind of shaped what I wanted to talk about and write about, and things that I was thinking about, like, wow, yeah, you were born during, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, and I am worried about what's going to happen in the future and what is the world going to be like for him. I want to keep him safe as much as possible. So I went in a little bit of a different direction and remembered, as Kira calls it, from the before times, that I was having this thought a lot about, you know, when we are centering human wants and needs all the time, we end up with a lot of things that are just unsustainable, and it's not right. So that's where that's what I was initially thinking and where I went.
I love it. I love like just like hearing of that journey too. We have a question from Charlotte who's joining us on YouTube. They ask, how would you recommend folks reflect on building out their own design principles for life and or work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As far as the process, I guess I can talk about it from like personal experience and then also professional experience. Starting with professionally. So with my team, when we start out on a project, we try to tailor the design principles to whatever the project is that we're working on, and make sure that obviously, like with every project, we try to have an equity lens because it's super important for the work that we're doing here in Baltimore City. But then we'll have a series of design principles that are also kind of more directly related to the project itself. And I'll shout out the designer on my team, Maria. She's done a really great job with leading sessions where we come up with design principles for things, for different projects. So I would say, you know, if there's something that you're working on, you could tailor some of the things that you really want to keep in mind to the work itself, or you could just have a set of kind of general words to live by. And I've always been really attached to the phrase "leave it better than you found it," because I really feel like we should all be doing that. So that is at the top of my list. I used to have another one that where words to live by. Am I allowed to swear, or should I?
You may.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So a phrase that I really like, or a motto to live by, is do no harm, but take no shit. And I love it because, you know, obviously it kind of reflects the medical community to some degree with that first part. But it also means like you should really be standing up for things. And in the design practice, I think that's really important. But I would sit down, you know, if you are a designer, depending on what kind of design you practice or what kind of projects you take on, what kind of impact do you want to have with them? Obviously, I think that sustainability is a really important feature, and that's how we would have more life-centered design. So I think, a design principle could be like not having anything disposable that comes out of the work that you're creating, right? Like having some set sort of like guidelines, like if you are a product designer or industrial designer, saying, I'm not going to create anything that's for single use unless, for a very specific reason it needs to be single use. So I would just sit down and write out what means something to you, and then reflect on the work that you're doing.
I just like love this idea of design not just being like designing something on your computer. Our next question comes from Rebecca, who's joining from YouTube. They ask, what would you say has been the greatest design success that you have participated in here in Baltimore?
Oh, that's another really good question. Yeah, I would say that, it was a little bit harder to measure, but we got a lot of positive qualitative feedback on it while we were doing it. When the pandemic started, my team actually kind of separated a little bit. And everyone in OPI, in the Office of Performance and Innovation, we were all deployed to different teams where we were needed. So myself and our designer, Maria, we went to the Joint Information Center with the city, which is, it's like a centralized team for communication, centralized communications that is activated during some kind of city crisis. So whatever the crisis is, the agency that's related to that leads the Joint Information Center. So in this case, it was the health department. So we worked with the health department in creating a lot of the really early COVID communications for the city, making sure that the graphics were easy to understand, easy to digest, that they were user-friendly, and also that the topic was salient for a range of audiences. So we did a lot of social media stuff. We also worked with community leaders on the ground to find out what kind of messages would be most appropriate for some of the priority populations that we had in the city. So example, we really wanted to make sure that we were reaching people in West Baltimore who might not be on some of the social channels. So we worked with community leaders to create a flyer, and I might get the number wrong, but I know it was in the tens of thousands of flyers that we produced, and community members and community leaders were the ones who actually dispersed them on the ground, which was really, really helpful. Because not everyone has digital access. And my team's working on a project related to digital equity right now, so that's something that we'll be working on. But that was a project that I was really, really proud of. Obviously, like this pandemic was really hard for everybody, and we needed to make sure that we were kind of promoting behavior change. So working on all the communications for that was something that I'm really proud of. And yeah, it was to measure the impact. I can't give you a quantitative number, unfortunately, and that's something that I would urge designers to really think about when you are working, because a lot of the times I think it's really easy to provide, like, if I'm going through a case study of projects that I work on and I say, here was the problem, here's what we came up with, I made this thing. And a lot of the times, like when you're presenting that work, it ends at, I made this thing, and doesn't really necessarily talk about impact. So if you can quantify impact that it has, that's great. If not, the qualitative is helpful as well. So because we got positive feedback from people and in a variety of different channels, I would say that one was pretty close to a win. Well, I shouldn't say it like that, because obviously the pandemic was still devastating here and we lost a lot of lives, which is horribly tragic. But as far as like reaching people, I know that we were able to reach a fair amount through social media and then through on the ground stuff.
Yeah, I love this idea of, like, again, going back to like kind of the crux of your talk of like life-centered design, and just kind of like meeting people where they are, recognizing like digital equity and all forms of that. So love that. Our next question is coming from YouTube. It's from Cincy Stat from Cincinnati.
Hi, Cynthia Stat.
They are asking, what is the most effective argument/pitch you found when explaining why human-centered design is necessary in government? The
Yeah.
easy questions at 9 a.m. this morning from
Yeah.
Cincinnati.
Y'all are really giving me the softballs here. Cynthia Stat, that is a great question. And it is something that I have been working on for the last 6 years in the federal government and then in a county and then now here in Baltimore. So one of the things that I think really helps is to de-jargonize as much as possible. So depending on the stakeholder, we'll change our language and how we talk about human-centered design because, what it is a method, it's an approach. So you don't necessarily have to use design terminology when talking about it. You can say, I really think that we should get some, if I'm making a website for somebody, I really think that we should maybe like ask some people beforehand what content they think is important. Maybe we'll do an activity with them to see, how they would prioritize content for that website. And then once we build the website, we'll go out and we'll show it to them and we'll get their feedback on it. Now, I've used a human-centered design approach there. I've done, some user experience design activities, but I haven't used any of the design terminology because I think sometimes that can be a little bit of a barrier in government for people, at least in my experience, that has been. So I think de-jargonizing is really helpful. What else? There was something else that I was going to say, and unfortunately, I have been awake since 3 a.m., so I might have moments where I was going to make another point, and then I forget what that point was, so please be patient with me. But
Yeah, it's a great takeaway.
okay, yeah, that's really helpful. And bringing your stakeholders in with you is another thing that's really helpful. So as much as possible, we try to include, if we're doing user research or user testing, bring our project champion into it with us so that they can see it and see the value and hear directly from the residents who would be using the things. Also, the third thing is here in Baltimore, we have a program called Design for Breakfast that the city runs. We're going to relaunch it in 2022, most likely virtually still, where we pick a different design topic every month, and we either have guest speakers from the city come and talk about their work, or even from outside the city virtually, or we'll run some kind of programming on design methodologies. So one of the ones we're going to do in 2022 is how to run a user test for a digital product. And so through that, the program started for city employees, and we got really great turnout when we started it. It was in person. And we're trying to build more design coalition and design understanding in the city. And I would say that this program has been helping with that because we get a lot of people coming to participate or have historically who aren't in a design role. They don't have a background in design. They're just city employees who are really interested in the topic, and see, how design can be beneficial and want to learn a little bit more about it. So building some knowledge that way is really helpful as well.
So, Creative Mornings audience could potentially come to Design for Breakfast.
Yeah, so the last few that we did were post-pandemic, and so they were virtual, and we doubled our attendance by having them be virtual, and folks from all over the country joined us, which was great. And I think the last one we did was we had Philadelphia's Service Design Studio give a share about their work, which was really cool. So.
Love it, love it. So check that out, y'all, when it comes back in 2022. Our next question comes from Raina, who is the proprietor of this lovely space, joining us from Facebook today. So hello, Raina. Good morning. I'm having trouble. Oh, there we go. Bringing up your question. So she says she loves this. And she wrote a quote this morning that basically said, empathy is the center of good design. How do you feel about that?
I agree and also disagree, and I'm going to explain why. So I do think empathy is really, really important. But I also think in the context, for human-centered design, don't get me wrong, empathy is that is it. You want to be empathetic to somebody's wants and needs. But when thinking about this sort of concept of life-centered design and sustainability, empathy for a human's wants and needs isn't necessarily going to lead to a sustainable solution to a problem. And that's one of the sort of like reframes that I want to have, moving forward as we continue on in our work for the city. And I'll give an example of, so let's say you're working on a transportation project and you want to find out how you can improve transportation in Baltimore City, and you talk to a bunch of people who, are using different forms of transportation, and you do a survey. You might get a lot of responses from people who, like maybe complain about traffic, who maybe complain about bicyclists or like bike lanes because it impedes parking, or like there's not enough parking, they might want more parking lots. So then you might start to focus, like if you were like empathetic to their wants and needs, you might start to focus on, having more sort of like car focused things in the city, like more parking lots, fewer bike lanes, take some resources away from potentially like improving bus lanes and like transportation like that. And even though you had empathy for them, it's not really sustainable, right? Like cars aren't a sustainable mode of transportation. I say this as somebody who is a car owner, regretfully, but I think empathy is incredibly important, but it also, you should consider that like the larger context, and is the thing that I'm making, is it going to cause harm in other ways to other things? Like, is it good for the environment, the earth as well?
No, thank you for that. Our next question is coming from Courtney, who's joining us over on YouTube. They ask, what was your biggest struggle that you've had to deal with as a designer? And what do you think you would do differently if you were starting in the field today? So that was a two-parter.
Yeah. Okay. The first part was,
what do you think is your biggest struggle that you've had to deal with as a designer?
okay. I would say in the private sector, my biggest struggle was the work that I was doing at times. It, again, didn't always align with my values, and I would, question why I was doing what I was doing. And it led to a lot of, I would say, just negative internal feelings that I had about myself and my life. It wasn't the case all the time. I would have some clients that I really loved. And again, small businesses, nonprofits, education projects, those were things that were like my favorites. In the public sector, biggest design challenges, I think sometimes is getting people to understand how design can help improve government. So, going back to Cincy Stat's question about that, that has been definitely a challenge, but again, like bringing folks along with you is really helpful, and being able to talk about things in plain language is incredibly helpful as well.
The part two of that question is, what do you think you would do differently if you're starting in the field today?
I want to say that I would start in the public sector sooner because I love working in the government. Partly because I'm very much I don't know if anyone does the Enneagram. I'm a 1, which is the reformer, and I love improving things, and there is no shortage of opportunities to improve things in government. So I find it just really exciting and challenging work, and very engaging. But when I reflect on my experience before being in the public sector, I worked with some incredibly creative and talented, smart people, and I learned so much from them, and sharpened my my design skills, my writing skills, my conceptual skills. And I when I look back on it, I really don't regret that. So even though sometimes it was a little bit of a like I said before, sometimes felt a little bit soulless, I was learning a lot, and I'm super grateful for that.
Wonderful. You all are doing so great with the questions. Keep them coming. Georgia is asking from YouTube, what project or projects have required you to be more adaptive, and how has that influenced your designs moving forward?
I think to some degree, all of the public sector projects have required some level of being adaptive. And I think a large part of that is because of I've experienced more turnover in the public sector. So, for example, with different projects that we've worked on, we may start with one project champion for it from another agency or from another office in the mayor's office, and that person might change. And I did work on a project where the stakeholder, like the main stakeholder that we were working with, changed 4 times over the course of, I guess it was 2 years. And our executive sponsor for the agency changed 4 or 5 times as well. So there was a lot of you would have to put together a presentation of where your work is and go back and introduce yourself and build trust over and over again. And I think it taught me a lot about how to build trust a little faster than maybe in the past I have. And it's, looking for opportunities to add value very quickly for them. Also it's how I talk about work. It's how I talk to people. So I've learned a lot in terms of how to engage a new stakeholder and get them to sort of buy into what we are doing.
Rochelle over joining us from YouTube as well asked, have you suggested a policy change or change to a well-established process as a design solution and received pushback from your government partner? How are you able to convince them to implement your solution?
So we haven't advocated for an official legislative policy for anything. And part of that is because we were foundation funded when the team started. We're no longer on the grant, but we were originally grant funded. And one of the stipulations was we couldn't really kind of play in that space. But recently, we did work on a new policy for the Baltimore Police Department, and this was related to making improvements to youth justice. So we worked with what was formerly the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice and the Police Department's compliance unit for the consent decree to work on creating a policy for interactions with youth, because there was no formal policy before that about how officers could and could not interact with youth. So we supported the consent decree team really drove that and wrote that policy, but we supported with some additional research. The Children's Center for Law and Policy did a ton of research that contributed to that. And there was a work group of us who would get together and review it, and then we trained youth on facilitating. It's going to sound a little bit meta. We ran some public work groups around the policy and trained youth who could help facilitate those public feedback sessions. And then had those public feedback sessions, and the consent decree team made changes to it. And that was approved by the Department of Justice in January of this year, February. And there is going to be a pilot for a diversion program that's related to it to keep youth out of the justice system as much as possible when it's possible. So that was an actual policy that we did work on more recently. Again, it's not legislative, but it's an official policy for the department.
Yeah, definitely. Your Office of 4 covers a lot of ground.
We do indeed. Yeah, and that's something that over the years we've talked about. Making sure that we have time to do the things we need to do, and we have a lot of meetings, and a lot of work happens in the sort of in between times.
Yeah. Cameron asked over from YouTube. Hey, Cameron. Cameron has been in this Creative Mornings Baltimore community for a while. How do you work through research overload experienced by users in the work? So, for example, folks who are often asked their opinions or are often the subjects of several interventions.
Yeah, so that came up recently with the digital equity work that we're doing, and I think it's come up before. I mean, it came up before too with the youth justice stuff that we did, because we've obviously, with some topics, people can feel very over-researched, and so one of the things that I would recommend is that if that is the case for anything that you're working on, finding out what research has been done already, if there have been any surveys, and speaking with whoever was responsible for conducting that and finding out if it's possible for them to share that data with you. I always recommend stripping personally identifiable information. We take out any kind of personally identifiable information in anything that we have. But I find it really helpful just to see what else exists out there that you can already tap into instead of kind of asking people the same things over and over, or like people who have survey fatigue or whatnot. Did that cover the question, or was there more to it?
I think so. I think
Okay.
that, and so then you all have so many good questions, but we're coming up at time. So I have like kind of a follow-up question to that. If folks were interested in, are there ways for folks to volunteer to be part of any of the work that you and OPI are doing?
Yeah. So that's a dream. I would say the one way that we have right now is through the Design for Breakfast program. So we have had some really wonderful speakers volunteer their time to do that. As I mentioned, the Philly Service Design Studio, Yawa Dantar, who is a user experience designer here in Baltimore and teaches at MICA. Who else? Proper Design. Bobby spoke about branding. So if there's any, sort of like design topic that you would be interested in, like doing a Skillshare with city employees, and also like now that we're virtual, it's city employees and beyond. You're welcome to get in touch with me. I don't know if my contact information will be shared here, but you're welcome to do that. And then the city had a civic innovators program that our team wasn't responsible for that. We had a separate program manager who was in OPI, and that was where private companies would loan us some of their employees to work on a very specific project. And, maybe in the future we could bring that back. It ended with the start of the pandemic, but we could consider doing something. But if there's enough interest, I'm a little skeptical of things like hackathons, because I think I've been a part of a lot of them, and I don't know, for longer term, they're really fun and exciting and full of energy, but I don't know about the necessarily what happens with the solutions that come out of them. So I think thinking about some kind of partnership that would have a little more longevity would be something that we could do with an OPI if there was interest in it.
Yeah.
I would say we don't have a lot of designers in government. If we do, they're usually visual designers, which is great. But I would love to see more user experience design and service design happening at scale across the city.
Mario agrees.
As you said, we're a 4-person team, so there's only so much that we can do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again. This is great, y'all.
Thank
This
you.
is so great. We're going to take a moment for a selfie moment now. So,
Okay.
Henley, if you could go tight on Emily again. If you are joining us from home, we would love you to take this moment to take a selfie with Emily. Look at that. Perfect selfie pose right there. We're going to take one in our studio in Adorn right now as well. Selfie moment with Emily. We would love to see you post this on the social media of your choice. Again, you can go ahead and tag us at Baltimore_CM. So thank you for that. I also want to just make sure you save the date on your calendar for the last talk of the year. It's going to be on Friday, November 19th. We're so excited to have the movement artist and just overall self-identified and I think recognized unicorn, Nicoletta De La Brown, who will be speaking on the theme of liminal, and that will be the last Creative Mornings talk of this year, and that will be on November 19th. So mark your calendars. Let's go ahead and close out with a couple collective breaths, and then we'll let you be on your way. So let's just do 3 breaths together. Sit, stand, whatever's comfortable for you. Let's breathe in and out, in and out. Last one, in and out. Thank you again for joining us this morning. We know that you're very busy and you're screen fatigued, but you're here nonetheless, and we love you for it. And we hope that you felt part of this community. We can't wait to see you again next month. And so be well. Happy Friday. Get vaxxed.